Hey there, Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement and bringing you another edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday training, where I take a concept or a strategy, something that we use to great effect in autism fitness programming, and bring it to you so that you can incorporate it into your fitness or adapted PE or movement programs for your autism and neurodivergent population, whether you're already running programs or thinking about running programs or thinking about running programs. These are strategies that are going to work for you and your athletes to make programs more meaningful and more effective. And before I get started, definitely like, definitely subscribe, and share these videos with people for whom they might make a difference. And in this edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday training, I'm going to be talking about three-dimensional scalability. All right? What does that mean? Fancy catchphrase? Yes, actually. But in 3 dimensions means the 3 areas of skill or the 3 areas of ability that we assess and address in autism fitness programming, because we cannot look at just one. Now, what 3 areas of skill am I talking about? Well, part of the PAC profile. The PAC profile is our standard operating system in autism fitness, and it stands for, say it with me now if you're already familiar, if you're a certified pro, you know this: physical, adaptive, and cognitive. Physical, the exercises themselves and to what level of ability or independence the athlete can currently perform that exercise. Adaptive, how motivated and engaged and focused is that athlete right now with this particular exercise at this current moment. And then cognitive, looking at neurological and then neuromuscular capabilities as they relate to exercise. So what does this actually mean on the floor in person? It means communication and coaching, how the athlete receives and interprets and processes information, and how they relay and provide us with information too. There is a big difference between an individual's productive or expressive speech or language or messaging or their communication and their receptive language skills and their information processing. And oftentimes people mistake the two, and they may mistakenly think that just because an individual is nonverbal or has limited verbal communication skills, that they cannot process information, and this is certainly not the case. Now, coming back to the PAC profile, we have to account for each one of these areas of ability, especially considering the fact that this is autism fitness and we're talking about fitness and exercise programs, in particular, strength building, resistance training based programs, because developing strength and motor skills is going to generalize above all else to activities of daily living and enable our athletes to be stronger, safer, move better at any age or ability levels. And that is why we focus on strength training as the predominant methodology in our programs, or predominant modality, I should say. So how does this come back to the idea of 3-dimensional? Well, when we're assessing our athletes, we're looking at those 3 areas of skill: the physical, the adaptive, and cognitive. And once we assess an athlete's capability, meaning we're going through that first session, and that first session could be 15 minutes, it could be 50 minutes, but we are gathering objective information about how well that athlete performs that exercise, how motivated they appear to be in engaging with that exercise or that activity, and then finally, how we need to coach and cue and communicate with that athlete, and how that athlete communicates with us in order to figure out how best to scaffold or provide structure around how we're teaching and training and coaching that athlete. All of these things are inherently important to the success of our program. So where does scalability come in? Well, it's not like we can just take an exercise and say, okay, here you're going to do this exercise, because what happens when the athlete does not yet, I say yet, have the strength and stability and motor planning and practice with that exercise in order to do that exercise safely and independently. Because it's not enough to just give them an exercise and say, okay, you're going to do squats, and then all of a sudden they're able to do squats. Or on the other side, if they do not have the motor planning to do the squats yet, if they have underlying strength deficits, which are very, very common for our autistic and neurodivergent athletes, well, do we just say, well, this is as good as they can do it, so whatever? That's not real programming, and that's not real coaching. So what we need to have in our toolbox is the ability to, of course, scale, in this case, modify each exercise, right? So what do we mean by modification? Modification means a simplification or lessening the challenge of a particular exercise. And we have to be able to do this for each and every exercise that we have in our program. Now, coming back to autism fitness programming, we have two areas of exercise, or two different types of exercises that we utilize in our programming. We have our power exercises, our medicine ball throws, our sandbell slams, and then we have our strength exercises, becoming strong in full range of motion with each of the fundamental movement patterns: squat, push, pull, hinge, carry, and that covers all your essential basics, right? I have plenty more videos on those exercises in particular. You can search through the channel. Go ahead, take yourself on a journey, but not before we get through this first, because this is ground level important. So in order to scale each exercise, we have to understand, how do we simplify this while still maintaining the integrity of this particular exercise? So for example, if we have an athlete who is not yet able to do a standing band pull down, great upper back and shoulder exercise, independently, do we just abandon it and say we're not going to do this because they can't do it independently yet? No, of course not. But we need a way to simplify that exercise or provide some type of support for that athlete so they can get the most out of that exercise right now, instead of just watching them quickly just pull on the band over and over and over again to no real training effect, but say, well, this is what they can do, so that's what we're going to do. That is not effective. It's not going to lead to any type of training stimulus. It's not going to lead to any type of benefit. It is veritably worthless unless we understand how to scale that exercise. In this case, modifying it and making it more accessible to that particular individual. So that's the physical. From the adaptive perspective, how do we modify? Well, many of our athletes in the beginning, when we were first introducing exercise programming to them, because it is technically some type of demand situation, so there's something that they need to be doing in order to be exercising, one of the challenges with that is some individuals will find it aversive. And it may not even necessarily be the exercise itself. It may be the fact that it's what we call a demand situation. So the individual is being asked to do an activity, and this in and of itself is aversive. And the reality is that exercise, when done right, is actually challenging. So that may be aversive for that individual as well. So it may not be the case that we are getting in 3 or 4 or 5 sets of an exercise in the first session or in the first few sessions, because that athlete is getting dysregulated, or they're demonstrating aversion to that exercise or the exercise program in general, or they are avoiding engaging in the exercise. So in this case, we need to come up with a contingency and some type of behavior support plan for that athlete. We need to reinforce when they are engaging in the exercise, and we also need to, here it comes, scale it so that it makes sense for that athlete and their current level of engagement with that exercise. What does that mean? It means we may scale back, even though we know that we want to, from a programming perspective, from a training perspective, and from a training effect perspective, meaning getting the most out of this particular exercise. We may want to do 3 or 4, even 5 sets of that exercise, but because the athlete is getting frequently dysregulated, because that athlete may be escalating in their level of anxiety or avoidance for this exercise, we say, okay, we need to build out a thinner contingency here, right? So rather than doing 3 or 4 or 5 sets of that exercise, we may start out with 1 or 2. So in that case, the athlete is only responsible for doing those 1 or 2 sets, and eventually we're going to start building out and increasing the ratio of activity, in this case exercise, to break or reinforcement time. Now, I will say, as a general rule, and I've tried this in the past, and it really does not work all that well to have a +2 minute break or preferred activity, because it makes it a lot more challenging for the athlete to transition back to exercise. So somewhere between 1 minute and 2 minutes is generally best practice. Any more than that, And oftentimes our athletes who do get dysregulated are going to continue to either get dysregulated or have an even more difficult time transitioning or coming back to the exercise situation. From a training effect perspective also, anything more than 2 minutes is really going to decrease the overall benefit of the exercise as well. So there is some carryover between the adaptive and the physical there. But we want to have very specific contingencies in place for this as well. So we might set it up on an athlete's visual board. All right, first you have one set of sandbell slams, and then you can take a 1 minute break. And then during those sandbell slams, we also want to highly reinforce that athlete, because we don't want the exercise to remain aversive for long. And one of the best ways to do that is to provide behavior-specific praise and reinforce the athlete for when they are doing something correctly, when they are doing it correctly as well. So using behavior-specific praise and using access to preferred activities, or even just a break between exercises. And again, not extending that break any longer than we really have to, because then we're starting to run into session time issues. Now, there are some outlier situations where we do need a longer break, or when we're first introducing exercise for an athlete who finds it highly aversive, an athlete who gets very frequently dysregulated. We may just start with one exercise and that's the entire session. This does come up every once in a while, and it's important to know that we can scale back a program as much as we need to. So from an adaptive perspective, what does scaling mean? It means that we can scale back the total number of exercises and the total number of sets of exercises, even down to scaling back the repetitions during a particular exercise. So for example, if we know that an athlete is getting highly dysregulated after, on average, 4 or 5 medicine ball push throws, we may scale back those sets to 3 or 4 sets of 3 or 4 repetitions of push throws, and do multiple sets and start to build up that athlete's ability and resilience in doing more repetitions of that push throw. So you see how we're starting to play around with the numbers here, going from more sets to less sets, or more reps to less reps, depending on that athlete's affect and how engaged they are with the exercise. And finally, we have cognitive, right? How do we scale cognitive? Well, one of our general practices in Autism Fitness is our label, demo, do, and cue practice. I've done plenty of videos about this. It is a cornerstone of the Autism Fitness Certification. But in short, label, demo, do, and cue is our process for introducing and teaching a new exercise without overcoaching. So when we are scaling our programming from a cognitive standpoint, it's really about using precise and concise language, and we're generally doing that with all of our athletes. Even if we have highly talkative, very verbose, conversational athletes, we're still, when we are introducing an exercise, we're using as little language as possible. And how do we modify that? Well, we can use visual schedules as a representation for different exercises, especially for the athletes who are asking what's next, or they're looking for some type of cue about what exercise is coming, what exercise order there is. Visual schedules can be phenomenal for this, in addition to the fact that we can also highlight when an athlete is going to have access to a reinforcer. Just today, I have an athlete who wants to finish the session relatively quickly. So after the last exercise, I drew a terrible picture of a house, but it represents that this athlete gets to go home after he carries the dinosaur eggs, which are the medicine balls, in a heavy carry exercise, right? So from a cognitive perspective, we want to scale things that in a way that is conducive to the athlete understanding the expectations for performing the exercise, and also understanding the expectations for that session. Now, it may be that we are reducing conversation to just the minimum to convey those ideas, or to convey coaching messaging. That's one thing. The other way that we can scale it is to have those visual schedules, or visual reminders of when certain things are happening. Right? Because when we start explaining things, it can become confusing and overwhelming for the athlete. So there you have 3D scalability. Of course, on the other side, we can always increase the stimulus or increase the challenge level of any exercise. That is the easiest thing to do on earth. Add repetitions, add weight, add sets. Easy to make these things more challenging. If you need more challenging variations, send me a message. I can give them to you. From an adaptive perspective, we may need to use a more one-to-one ratio of exercise to reinforcement, or exercise to preferred activity, or exercise to break, because that athlete is still finding exercise, or a particular exercise, aversive. So sometimes it's not exercise in general, but it's one or two specific exercises that they are trying to avoid, or that are causing anxiety. And from a cognitive perspective, of course, it's going to be limiting our language, not in conversation with the athlete, but limiting our language around how to perform each exercise, right? So from all three areas of ability, now there's no way to leave one of them out without having something fall through in your programming. So all of these need to be accounted for. 3D scalability means understanding the physical, adaptive, and cognitive baseline capabilities of your athlete, and understanding what to do about it as well. And speaking about what to do about it, if you are ready to join the Movement for Movement and become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro, link is in the description below. You can join our almost 700 pros and parents worldwide who are making the lives of the neurodivergent people in their lives better through fitness, developing strength, safety, and greater independence through fitness. You're going to be hearing a lot more and more about how the development and maintenance of lean body mass and strength is a tremendous factor in quality of life. And that's not just the neurotypical population, but for the neurodivergent population. Issue is, not many people know how to integrate meaningful and effective fitness programs for the autism population, but that's where you can come in by becoming an Autism Fitness Certified Pro. Once you register, you get access to your online coursework, and then, of course, your full day virtual or in-person practical for the hands-on, brains-on, feet-on training that you and your athletes deserve. I'm Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the Movement for Movement. Thank you very much for watching.